I think my biggest problem has always been my appearance. I am not the kind of man every woman envisions when dreaming of her knight in shining armor. I'm a big simpleton, standing 190 centimeters tall and weighing nearly 140 kilograms. Thankfully, I have very little body fat. I have a broad nose, emphasized by my deep-set, slightly crossed eyes. I still have all my teeth and a full head of hair, but that doesn't improve the overall picture much that I work hard as a heavy equipment operator, which is why my reddish hair is kept short. It's easier to maintain cleanliness that way, and it doesn't fall into my eyes. Despite all my shortcomings, I was lucky to find a woman to marry and spend my life with. Loretta wasn't unattractive, but she couldn't be called a dazzling beauty either. To me, she was perfectly fine. Compared to me, of course, she was petite, standing at 160 centimeters tall. She tolerated my roughness and always teased me about it in a good-natured way. Whenever she joked with me, I never felt insulted or belittled. It was nice to feel comfortable around her. We got married young and had 2 children, our son, Brian, who is now 16, and our daughter, Monica, who is a year younger. Fortunately, the kids took after their mother more than me. They were smart and well-mannered. I was a proud father, as well as a satisfied and happy husband. I worked for my Uncle Saul as a heavy equipment operator. It was more or less a family business, but Uncle Saul was the one in charge of everything. We all received salaries and worked as many hours as we could. At the end of the year, any profit that wasn't spent on acquiring new equipment was divided among the family members. It was a pleasant arrangement. Loretta got a job at a small company that conducted property appraisals for banks and investment firms. She didn't handle the actual assessments but was responsible for typing reports, formatting documents, and entering data. Life was good, and I should have just left things as they were. It was a small thing that made me start thinking. I just happened to notice something that looked like a mark on my wife's neck. Normally, I would have teased her about it, but for some reason, I didn't this time. If it was a mark, I knew for sure I hadn't left it there. It could have been an insect bite or maybe an ingrown hair. She heightened my unease by trying to cover it up with makeup while we were at home. I could understand why she might want to hide it if she were going out, but why bother doing it at home? If Loretta was seeing someone else, she must have been doing it during the day. She never went out at night when I wasn't around. I was certain she wasn't meeting anyone at our house. This troubled me for an entire week. Of course, by that time, the mark had faded, but the memory of it lingered. Our intimate life was great. Maybe I wasn't as romantic as I should have been, but I always bought her flowers for no reason and never forgot her birthday or our anniversary. We regularly went out to eat and took any chance we could to see a show or catch a movie. Every year we'd go on a family vacation to some special destination. I valued her as a wife and as a companion. Now I was losing my mind with doubts over a stupid red mark on her neck. Things at work were a bit slow, so Uncle Saul had no problem giving me a few days off. I had no idea what I needed or what I was going to do with my time. I decided to just follow her and see if anything unusual happened. I borrowed a car from one of the guys at work and bought a book of crossword puzzles. For 2 days, nothing happened. I followed her to work, to lunch, and back home. By the 3rd day, I started feeling like a complete idiot. Loretta left the office for lunch a bit earlier than usual. Instead of heading to her car, she walked around the side of the building. A white four-door company car pulled up behind me, and Loretta got into the passenger seat. She was probably going to lunch with someone from work. It was a little different from the previous 2 days, but not that unusual. I easily followed them, and that's when my worst fears were confirmed. The white car pulled into the parking lot of one of those small, shabby motels near the state line. I recognized the guy as one of the appraiser's leaders. He already had a key. They entered the room like they'd done it 100 times before. He was a good-looking guy, probably 10 years younger than Loretta. They drew the curtains and closed the blinds. Unfortunately, I hadn't thought this far ahead. I had no idea what to do next. I suppose the smartest person in the world would be me. I was a little bit confused. I had no idea what to do next. I suppose the smartest thing would have been to wait for Loretta to come home that evening and then confront her face to face. But my emotions got the better of me. I got out of the car and headed for the motel door. It was an old motel, and both the door and its frame were wooden. Even if the door had a safety latch, a strong show could rip the screws right out of the frame. About 10 minutes had passed since they'd gone into the room. I stopped one of the staff members and told her to call 911. She gave me a strange look but immediately grabbed her phone. I decided to wait another 5 minutes before breaking down the door. My patience only lasted 2. I slammed into the door with my right shoulder as hard as I could. The lock didn't just give way. The hinges tore right out of the wall. The door crashed onto the floor with a deafening noise, terrifying Loretta and her companion. They were lying in bed, and before he could even get off her, I grabbed him by the neck. Seeing my wife with another man was more than I could bear. It was his fault because he knew she was married. It was her fault for the same reason. My rage erupted uncontrollably. My wife had never seen this side of me before. Tom, or whatever his name was, didn't recover from the first 2 punches, which broke several of his ribs. After that, he couldn't move or even catch his breath. I didn't rush. I methodically hit him in the face and body until it was covered in blood, bruises, and fractures. Loretta was screaming for me to stop, and at one point she tried to grab me. Mid-swing, I hit her in the mouth with my elbow. She flew across the room, blood pouring from her split lip. Then everything went dark. When I regained consciousness, I was handcuffed in the back seat of a police car. Paramedics were wheeling Tom away on a stretcher, and Loretta was standing by the ambulance, treating her lip while wrapped in a motel sheet. She looked over at the patrol car, saw me, and broke into tears. A female officer escorted her back to the room as the police car pulled out of the motel parking lot. I didn't contest the charges or ask for a lawyer or a trial. Justice was swift. Since I had asked the maid to call 911 before breaking down the door, they called it premeditated. That didn't matter much to me. I was sentenced to 2 years in prison. My brother Louis was the only one who came to see me before I was sent to the state penitentiary. He promised to visit me once things settled down and that I could end my new home. I didn't have any problems, especially after word spread about why I was there. It was 10 days before Louis came to visit. "John, I was going to bring you some cigarettes, but then I remembered you don't smoke," Louis said, trying to lighten the mood with a little joke. "Cut the nonsense, Louis. What's going on at home? No one's telling me anything, and all I hear in this place are rumors and utter nonsense." It's as bad as it could possibly be. The kids in the family are in despair, and Loretta has been hiding in the house ever since it happened. Brian and Monica stayed with Mom and Dad, but plan to return home later this week. I don't know anything about Loretta because she isn't talking to anyone. Her sister Joyce went to the house, but Loretta wouldn't let her in. Has Loretta spoken to the kids? No. They've tried several times, but she's completely refusing to talk to them. I don't think she's ever going to discuss what actually happened with anyone, so I take it she's not planning to go back to work. Damn it, she's not even planning to leave the house. She's going to run out of food and drink. Who's paying the bills? I don't know. I'll ask Brian to see if he can figure something out later this week. Monica is determined to move back into the house one way or another. What about the guy? His name is Tom Bostic. He's still in the hospital and will probably be there for a couple more weeks. What the hell? He's still in the hospital. Why is he still in the hospital? You beat him up pretty badly, John. Besides broken ribs and a fractured collarbone, he had a lot of internal injuries. I couldn't get all the details, but I think it has something to do with his kidneys and spleen. You also did some damage to his personal areas. He's eating through a straw, and there's something wrong with one of his eyes. Maybe I lost control. Seems like it. I think I need to talk to the kids. Could you bring them next time you visit? I don't see why not. After Louis left, I made a list of things I thought needed to be taken care of at home. Of course, all of it was based on what Louis had told me about Loretta's behavior. I felt obligated to ensure the household was properly managed, at least until the kids finished school. Brian and Monica showed up 5 days later. Louis wasn't with them. "Where's your uncle? He had to work." I picked up Mom's car from her office, and we decided to come here on our own. Brian said, looking proud of himself, "What was she doing at the office? She left it there the day you were arrested. Mom never went back to get it. She hasn't driven or even left the house since. Is she okay?" Monica shook her head and looked up. "No, she doesn't talk, she just flutters around the house. She won't answer any questions and refuses to pick up the phone. The answering machine is full. I've been trying to return as many calls as I can, but only from relatives. Even reporters have been calling. 'Kids, will you be okay there, or would you prefer to stay with Grandma and Grandpa?' 'I think we'll be fine, Dad. We just need to establish some sort of routine,' Brian said confidently, and I was glad to see my kids taking control of the situation. We spent the next hour discussing what they could do and how I could help. I was still receiving my paycheck, so I suggested setting up automatic payments for all the utility bills. I asked Monica to take her mother's bank card so they could withdraw cash for other expenses. The card also functioned as a debit card, which would make handling some other costs easier. Brian took care of yard work and car maintenance while also helping Monica with household chores and cooking. Apparently, Loretta was still capable of taking care of herself, but had completely lost the desire to interact with anyone. Monica mentioned that her mother had developed a bit of an obsessive fixation on cleaning and the house's overall appearance. She was constantly dusting and rearranging things for no apparent reason. I wasn't sure whether that was a good or bad sign. Before they left, I asked Monica to tell her mother that I wanted to talk to her about what had happened. Monica didn't seem to think Loretta would be willing, but she promised to try. Loretta never came to visit me in prison. She didn't call or even write. Monica and Brian tried unsuccessfully to convince her, even involving Loretta's sister, Joyce. 6 months passed. Everything had settled down, but I still hadn't received any explanations from my wife. Brian, Monica, and Louis visited me regularly, and a few guys from work even took a day off to come by and chat. After that, things got a little more interesting. 2 weeks after Tom Bostic's injury, his wife served him with divorce papers. He had nothing to fall back on. Now he had 2 kids to support, plus alimony and housing expenses. When Tom was discharged from the hospital, he was transferred to a rehabilitation center. His expenses started exceeding his insurance coverage, so he decided to sue me. It was a mess, and I didn't understand any of it. That's when Uncle Saul stepped in to help. Within a week, the company's lawyer filed counterclaims against Bostic for alienation of affection and against the company where both Bostic and Loretta worked. The lawyer was a shrewd and aggressive man. Suddenly, all lawsuits on both sides came to an abrupt halt. I didn't receive anything, but I didn't have to pay anything either. 3 months later, the situation was very serious. I didn't have anything either. 3 months later, the situation in the family hadn't changed. Brian graduated from high school and enlisted in the Air Force. He was scheduled to leave in a month. Since Monica now had a driver's license, they didn't think his departure would cause any problems. Loretta still wasn't answering phone calls and continued refusing to leave the house. While she didn't cause Monica any trouble, it was clear this couldn't go on indefinitely. Loretta started saying no to Monica every time she tried to talk to her or suggested visiting me. After Brian left, Monica began coming to see me alone. Sometimes she came with Louis. Once, Joyce, Loretta's sister, visited me, and I never understood why. Nearly a year had passed since I began serving my sentence. My wife had become a recluse, refusing to see or speak to me or anyone else. I spent many hours reflecting on the situation. Loretta had never apologized to me. She had never asked for my forgiveness. She had never explained why she had an affair. She never suggested any ways we could address or fix what had gone wrong. She never even acknowledged that anything had gone wrong. It felt as though I didn't matter at all. It made me feel small and insignificant. The fact that she didn't respond to my feelings about the situation showed me that, in her opinion, I wasn't worth her time or attention. I felt like a bug on her windshield or a piece of dog waste stuck to the bottom of her shoe. Once the problem of me was dealt with, she'd never have to worry about it again. I could spend hours thinking about things like this. I found an inner rage growing within me. Tom Bostic completed his rehabilitation program and was now living in a cheap apartment near his workplace. Louis told me that he walked with a limp and seemed to have a tick in his right eye. I felt a bit sorry for the guy until Monica shared some alarming news. Loretta was taking a shower when Monica had been in the bathroom. While searching through her mother's purse, Monica found a prepaid cell phone hidden at the bottom. The phone had only one number programmed into it. Monica wrote down the number from the phone and the one listed in the directory. It was disturbing news. Of course, given how things had unfolded, I wasn't planning to go back to Loretta under any circumstances. However, the phone was not in the right place. Of course, given how things had unfolded, I wasn't planning to go back to Loretta under any circumstances. However, the thought that she might still be in contact with Bostic filled me with rage. 2 weeks later, it was announced that 127 of us would be released early. My name was on the list. While I was in prison, I had no problems, and when I got out, I had a job waiting for me and was a first-time offender. How lucky can a person be? Louise and Monica came to pick me up. I decided to stay at my parents' house for a while until Loretta adjusted to my presence. It turned out to be an unnecessary precaution. Loretta was gone. For the first time in a year, she had left the house. She didn't tell anyone where she was going and left no note. A quick check showed that she had taken most of her clothes and a few suitcases. I had been avoiding a confrontation with my wife about her infidelity, or rather, she had been avoiding me. I had been looking forward to hearing her explanation. Of course, if she still refused to talk after I got home, I wouldn't have learned anything anyway. I also found out that Tom Bostic had quit his job that same week. Instead of staying with my parents, I moved back into the house with Monica. She seemed happy to have me home, especially since she now had a steady boyfriend. Of course, that also meant I spent most nights at home alone. I never thought I'd miss my cellmates. Any kind of interaction was better than none at all. A week later, I returned to work. It felt as though I'd never left. I felt obligated to Uncle Saul and his family, so I worked overtime whenever I could. No one denied me the opportunity. Somehow, over the past year, I seem to have lost my taste for beer. I know it sounds strange, but it just didn't quench my thirst the way it used to. I was never into hard liquor, so I started drinking a lot of cola and iced tea. I joked about it a bit, but I was immune to pure pressure from my buddies. The worst part came at night when I caught myself thinking about Loretta and Tom Bostic. They had made a fool of me. I didn't even know Bostic, but the way my wife treated me was undeserved. I had never treated her poorly. I never abused her, physically or verbally. I always treated her with respect and love. I had done nothing to make her dislike me. Of course, I had never been a fool of myself. I had done nothing to make her dislike me. Of course, I had the sense that she didn't actually dislike me. She just didn't feel anything at all. She had discarded me like an old shoe without a second thought. It was humiliating. Monica tried to help as much as she could, but there wasn't much she could do. I was happy she had found a boyfriend, especially after the struggle she faced last year taking care of her mother. I wanted to give her as much time as she needed to make up for what she had missed. I also tried not to show my depression either at home or at work. The more time I spent at work, the less I thought about Loretta. When I came home, I usually felt tired and slept well. One Sunday afternoon, I decided to visit Joyce. Joyce was Loretta's younger sister. She was divorced and had 2 kids in elementary school. I always appreciated the fact that she visited me while I was in prison, though I never understood why. Sometimes I thought that if I had been a little friendlier when she came, she might have returned more often. "John, it's so nice to see you. I heard you were back home. Come in. Would you like some coffee or a drink?" I followed my sister-in-law into the kitchen. "Coffee would be great. I think I know where she is." "Great. I think I know why you're here." "I don't know much, but I'll help if I can. The main question, which you probably can't help me with, is why." Joyce placed 2 steaming cups on the table and sat across from me. "You're right, John. I won't be able to help you. I've asked her several times in different ways, but she either ignores me or changes the subject. I thought she wasn't speaking to you. Until a week ago, she refused even to meet with me. Then, out of nowhere, she decided she wanted to talk. For a few moments, there was silence. It seemed Joyce was ready to answer my questions, but she was a bit cautious about volunteering anything. "Joyce, why did you come to see me in Gradford?" "I don't know. I felt that Loretta had let you down somehow, and I didn't think you deserved that. You didn't seem too happy to see me, so I didn't come back. I'm sorry. I was still hurting. I didn't understand why you came, and I didn't know how to react. I guess I was too sensitive. Other than what I read in the papers, I still don't know what happened." Joyce sighed slightly. I finished my coffee and chuckled softly. It was simple. She cheated. I caught them, and I confronted the guy. End of story. Except that you spent a year in prison. I like to think of it as a vacation. It was better than one of those trips. We both tried to find humor in the situation, but it didn't work. "Why are you really here, John? Where is she?" I tried to keep my questions simple to get a direct answer. "In Reno." "Dan." It worked. I asked a question and got an answer. Loretta came to me to talk about her divorce. I couldn't help her because I didn't have the answer she was looking for. "Why?" "She wants a divorce that would let her break free without seeing you or having any contact with you." I told her she couldn't do that here. She seemed a little upset. She didn't want to go to Nevada because of the residency requirements, but she decided it was her only option. The company she worked for had a branch in Reno. The guy she was with, Tom, managed to get a transfer there. She plans to file for divorce as soon as she's lived there long enough. It all made sense. I didn't like it, but it made sense. I don't know why she didn't just do this while I was in Reno. She could have sent me the papers and I would have gladly signed them and sent them back. She waited too long and worked herself into a frenzy. What the hell did I do wrong, Joyce? I asked my sister that when she was leaving. She just smirked and walked out the door without giving me an answer. Maybe she decided I wasn't good looking enough. Shame she didn't tell me that before we got married, that he'd never have had Brian and Monica. All I could manage was a faint smile. John, my husband, was handsome, but he was difficult. That's a terrible reason to marry a man. I won't make that mistake again. Maybe I'll have to find a divorced woman who used to have a handsome husband. Maybe next time I'll get lucky. It was a stupid thing to say, but I wasn't going to be a man. Maybe next time I'll get lucky. It was a stupid thing to say, and I didn't realize it until the words had already left my lips. Embarrassed, I stood up and thanked Joyce for the coffee and conversation. I think I finally understood why she had visited me in Gradford. Not only am I unattractive, but apparently I'm also a bit of an idiot. As I left, she looked a little flustered, and I couldn't shake the uncomfortable feeling. I booked a week-long Caribbean cruise and gave the ticket to Luis. He wasn't married, and I knew he'd appreciate the trip, especially on my dime. In exchange, I borrowed his car. The less he knew, the better. The drive to Reno took me 3 days that I found a vacant building east of Sparks, and I had no trouble convincing Tom Bostic to come out and inspect its condition. He arrived with his trusty notebook and tape measure. 30 minutes later, he was sitting in the trunk of Lewis's car, heading east. I drove about 50 kilometers past Winnemucca before finding a suitable turnoff. I didn't know where the dirt road led, but I only drove the first mile. Tom was still breathing when I put him in the trunk, but at some point over the last few hours, he decided to stop. It was unfortunate because I had hoped to talk to him a bit more. I found a nice little ravine with plenty of rocks and scraggly vegetation. I took his watch, wallet, and cell phone before dumping the body into the ravine. Eventually, someone might find him, but not before the coyotes and other creatures had finished with him. I continued my journey east, feeling a bit less humiliated. I never thought of myself as a vengeful person, but apparently I was. I stopped at a casino in Elko and left Tom's wallet in the men's restroom. I was sure someone would pick it up and use the credit cards. No one would report the wallet missing, which meant no one would report any unauthorized charges either. The watch wasn't anything special, so I just tossed it into a dumpster. I had just arrived in Utah and decided I'd call Joyce when I got back home. Maybe nothing would come of it, but I had to go to the hotel. But at least I could enjoy a nice dinner at a restaurant with her. I was already starting to feel better when my cell phone rang. The display showed the same number Monica had given me. It seemed I was finally going to talk to my wife. Tom, where the hell are you? Tom, are you there? Answer me. My raspy voice is as distinctive as my unremarkable appearance. There was no way I could hide it, sorry. You got the wrong number. I paused just long enough to hear my wife say, "Oh God, no." I tossed the cell phone out of the car window. In a few days, I'd be home. I really hoped Louise was enjoying my vacation. Thanks to everyone who took the time to listen to today's stories. If you enjoyed it, please consider liking and subscribing if you haven't already. Feel free to share your thoughts on the events in the comments below. Take care.